bonus special effects that cost this network over $8 to produce. Our Friday flashback tonight takes us back to the early 60s and the adventures of ace sleuth John Steed and his sexy partner, Mrs. Peel. The Avengers, an overnight hit in England, soon found its way to America. And each week we watch them track down psychopaths, robots, and monsters, all of whom are booked on the show next week, by the way. Well, after nearly 3 decades, it is still successful in syndication. Welcome the durable and most debonair among spies, Mr. Patrick Macnee. It's a great pleasure to meet you. I've enjoyed your work for a long time. Still do. You're a busy guy. You pop up all over. You're selling cars now. Do I see you doing that?
I hope so.
You know, in looking at some of the information about the show, The Avengers, one thing I didn't realize until recently is that some of the early programs were banned in this country, and they didn't seem all that racy to me.
No, you have to remember it was 1960. In fact, one of the main things that those girls did, Di Rigg and Honor Blackman, was they coincided in a comic strip way with the start of feminism. It was the early 60s, so they did things that women on television had never done before. So I think it astonished people. Now, as you know, and in fact for the past 5 years, I've worked for nobody but women, and women in BMWs run us over, us old age pensioners, all the time. It's a completely different... But in my day, when we were starting the Avengers, we liked to think that we were advancing the cause of feminism, and Di Rigg in particular did that. Yeah, I think the shows that you talk about were brought here... I mean, this country was a great deal more puritanical in the early 60s, and I think I believe you have one in which Di does a belly dance.
Is that what we have? Well, and is this one that was...
I believe so, and there was some problem about... Because the navel, apparently, has some deeply erotic signification, which...
That's right. There was another show here called I Dream of Jeannie, and there was a big brouhaha about her navel.
Was there?
Yes.
Well, now, Di Rigg always said, and I thought quite logically, she said, but I've got a diamond in it. You know, that covered it up and was perfectly all right.
And I would suspect she has a lovely navel.
Well, absolutely beautiful. And I saw her on Mystery last night introducing it. She looked absolutely gorgeous in a black dress and a big red thing there and a décolletage.
Well, we do have this. You're exciting me, John. Now, maybe we see this. Well, let's take a look at this clip. And this is one that had trouble getting past, I guess, the American
Apparently, at that time. I doubt if it would now.
What's your party turn? Giselle?
Shh. We don't want to offend the offendee.
So much fun to see. I think it was the fellow who licked his lips that made that.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
I believe
the lascivious
that's what
intent.
Did it. We talked about the women's movement and perhaps this being a precursor of that. How were the women treated on the set?
Well, there was a bad irony about that, I think, in that although they were personifying that, and I'm quite serious about that. People think, well, I mean, what do you mean you had something to do with the women's movement? People were not portrayed on television at that time, women, as doing something.
Sure.
And of course she did that, I mean, throwing men over her shoulder, speaking out, deciding things. I have a great pride in that we were a forerunner. But the show was still run by male chauvinist pigs. I mean, really old-fashioned, bad entertainment types. And they treated her badly. They didn't bother about her period, the time she worked. They paid her less than the makeup man. Not that I have anything against makeup men at all. But on the other hand, she was treated badly. So she said, to hell with you, and left. And everybody said, oh, why did she leave? She left. And somebody else came in, the show collapsed. It's that simple.
You know, one of the nice things when I see you in interviews talking about the show is you talk about it with great affection. I don't know if it was the greatest time in your life or not, but...
It was a very tough time. I was married, and the marriage was absolutely disastrous. I was trying to bring up 2 children. I sent them to college. I stayed 9 years with the show. We went through every sort of... We were before the Bond show and all those things. Yes, I sort of lived with it, but you can't say you enjoyed that sort of thing.
Yeah. But you never dump on the show, which a lot of people do. They'll be with it serious, and then they say, oh, this was terrible, I don't want to be a part of it.
But I think that's ridiculous. I wasn't known from a hole in the ground, and I was delighted to do it, happy to do it, and enjoyed the success of it.
Now, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to expand our conversation here, because you have an autobiography, very entertaining, and quite an interesting life you've had, sir. The book is called A Blind in One Ear. We'll find out what that means and talk about that a little bit with our guest, Patrick Macnee. Stay right there.
The Pat Sajak Show, sponsored by Nuprin. The medicine that gives you big pain relief in a little yellow pill, in tablets and caplets.
Welcome back. Patrick Macnee is here. I mentioned the book, which is called Blind in One Ear, which means what, sir?
Well, I suppose it really means not rocking the boat. A lady was describing a poor duck and her ducklings down in Palm Springs where I live, and she said that it was blind in one ear, poor thing. Well, she meant deaf in one ear, and I should have said, you mean deaf in one ear, but my whole life has been when people say outrageous and stupid things, I don't say anything. I should put my hand up. And never have, so I've gotten into a lot of trouble.
I understand. You mentioned women and having worked with them and the women's movement and all that, and women were very important in your life, your mother particularly. You had interesting parents.
Well, well, she was an astonishing woman. I mean, sex was really no barrier, and she, I think, lived the sort of life that a lot of us would really like to. She lived with her female lover, and she came and visited my father, who was a very small man. His name was Shrimp Macnee. He was the smallest racehorse trainer in Lambourne, Berkshire. And then she went on to visit my brother's father, Ozzie Bell, who was about the tallest racehorse trainer. And then she went back to her female lover for dinner, carrying me in tow, dressed in a kilt, because her female lover wouldn't allow men in the house, and so I could come in as long as I had a skirt on.
I see.
So it was an interesting sort of
thing.
But I admired her. She died at 95 years old a couple of years ago, with a glass of brandy in one hand, sitting in her bath, and just went, I hope I go that way, and she had a wonderful life.
What about your young years, your school years? Were you a rowdy kid, a troublemaker?
Oh, not at all. No. But to live that sort of life, you know, that she lived, you have to send the child away. So I was what they call sent away at the age of 5, and didn't come back till I was 17, and I went to a single-sex school, which can get you into all sorts of trouble. But that was years ago when they sort of beat the hell out of you, and you had a very tough time, and you never saw... The first woman I ever saw, I was 19, I remember, with no clothes on. I married her. I was so excited. It was so
Now, but you are no longer married to that woman. You are...
No, I've married 2 women. I'm now very happily married to a wonderful Hungarian lady called Baba, and we're extremely happy and have 2 lovely dogs.
Oh, that's good. That sounds like a very nice family
yes.
you have there. Now, you're a very busy gentleman. Now, what do you have coming up? First of all, you have the weirdest movie I have ever heard of. The weirdest title I've ever heard.
Oh, you mean The Lobster Man from Mars?
That would be the one, yeah.
Well, that's Tony Curtis and I star in that. I've done a remake of The Fall of the House of Usher. No, The Mask of the Red Death. I've made an amount of the most forgettable movies you've ever heard in your life. I've just finished a movie with F. Murray Abraham, who's a very distinguished actor, and I go all the way through... I'm on a couple of weeks' time on this thing, in the return of Sam McLeod. He rides his horse all the way around... He's 62 years old, Dennis Weaver. All the way around Trafalgar Square, which I thought was pretty terrific.
I think so, too, sure. I'm very impressed with that.
No, I get about a lot. Well, I'm an old-age pensioner, and rather than fall down dead, you know, in my tracks, which I may do when I leave this studio...
No.
I prefer to keep going.
You have worked... you kid about your body of work a little bit, but you've worked with some great people and been involved with some terrific projects. You talk about Richard Burton a little bit, because I know you...
Well, so many people, you know, say... I hate it when they say about a talent or a great genius, in the case of Van Gogh, for instance. I mean, so few people seem to know that he did his entire work in 10 years, because he then went mad. Now, Richard Burton was one of the greatest film actors, in my opinion, ever. He just did his great work in a short time and then died. That doesn't make him any less good or a waste. I have a great admiration. I love Richard, and I thought he was a great, great actor.
Yeah. Did you spend a lot of time with him off?
I spent a lot of time, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic. My alcoholic days ended about 10 years ago. My smoking days ended 20 years ago. I used to be a cigarette with a man attached to it. I used to smoke 80 a day, yeah.
80?
80, yes.
It's impossible to smoke 80.
No, it isn't. It's remarkably good fun, because the cigarette's the most important thing in your life. You don't have to walk, make love, talk to anybody, do anything. You sit there with a glass of whiskey in one hand and the other. But, you know, I'm an advertisement for the fact that you can do all those things, give them up when you're 50.
Is that the key?
That's the key.
Now, are you patient with others who haven't given those things up?
I'm infinitely patient with all people because people were so patient with me.
Because sometimes a reformed smoker, for example, can be
Yes,
a
I
pain.
think to be a reformed anything is extremely dangerous. I mean, I think the Jesus freaks and I think all the people who have taken a religion or taken a virtue late in life are really sort of, it's no good at all. Now, I have great love and affection for people and I just hope to goodness they don't die earlier than they should.
Again, the book is called Blind in One Ear, and it's been fun looking back at the Avengers. We thank you for letting us do that and catching up on what's going on in your life. Great pleasure having you.
It's lovely seeing you.
Patrick Macnee, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Stay right there a moment. We'll take a break, and Misha Paris will be back. Be safe.